Virgo, before you make a decision about someone, before you close the door, before you decide that you already know exactly what their silence means, before you convince yourself that you are better off walking away and never looking back, there is something you need to hear. Because there is a possibility that you are about to make a decision based on what you think is happening rather than what is actually happening. And the difference between those two things could change everything. You may believe that someone no longer cares. You may believe that someone has moved on. You may believe that their silence means indifference. You may believe that their distance is proof that they never valued you. You may believe that because they did not say something at the exact moment you needed to hear it, they must not feel anything at all. And Virgo, you may be wrong. Not necessarily because your feelings are wrong, not because your pain is imaginary, not because everything this person has done should suddenly be excused, but because there may be more happening beneath the surface than you currently understand. And the mistake you are about to make may be very simple. You may be about to permanently reject someone who has not actually given up on you. You may be about to close a door because you are tired of standing in front of it. You may be about to assume that a delay means a denial. You may be about to believe that someone who has been quiet has nothing left to say. And the truth is, Virgo, sometimes people become quiet precisely because they have too much to say. Sometimes silence does not mean there are no feelings. Sometimes silence means someone does not know how to communicate them. Sometimes silence means fear. Sometimes it means pride. Sometimes it means uncertainty. Sometimes it means a person is waiting for a sign that you may not even realize you are sending. And if you are not careful, you may interpret their hesitation as rejection. That is the warning here. You may be about to make a decision that feels logical, a decision that feels justified, a decision that makes perfect sense based on everything you have experienced. But there may be one piece of information you do not have, one conversation that has not happened, one truth that has not been spoken, and that missing piece could completely change the way you see this person. Virgo, you are someone who has learned from experience. You do not simply forget what people have done. You remember patterns. You remember inconsistencies. You remember promises that were made and never kept. You remember the moments when someone made you feel like you were asking for too much when you were actually asking for the bare minimum. You remember what it felt like to give someone the benefit of the doubt and then realize that they were using your patience as permission to continue disappointing you. So now, when someone becomes distant, you notice. When their energy changes, you notice. When their replies become shorter, you notice. When their effort begins to disappear, you notice. And because you are observant, you begin to connect the dots. You start asking yourself questions. Why are they acting like this? Why are they suddenly different? Why do I feel like I am the only one trying? Why should I continue waiting for someone who cannot give me clarity? And eventually, you may reach a conclusion. You may decide that you have seen enough. You may decide that you are done. You may decide that you are not going to chase anyone. And honestly, Virgo, that part is not wrong. You should not chase someone who repeatedly shows you that they do not want to meet you halfway. You should not beg for basic communication. You should not abandon your dignity to keep someone interested. You should not constantly excuse behavior that continues to hurt you. But the warning is not telling you to ignore reality. The warning is asking you to make sure you actually know the truth before you make a permanent decision. Because there is a difference between walking away from someone who has clearly chosen not to show up and walking away from someone who is struggling to show up but has not actually stopped caring. Those two situations may look very similar from the outside, but emotionally, they are completely different. And someone may be afraid that you are about to place them in the first category when they actually belong to the second. They may know that they have not handled everything perfectly. They may know they have been distant. They may know they have confused you. They may know that their behavior has not matched their feelings, and they may be aware that you are reaching your limit. This person may feel that you are becoming emotionally unavailable to them, not because you never cared, but because you have finally reached the point where caring is no longer enough. You may have given this person time. You may have given them chances. You may have waited for them to explain themselves. You may have tried to understand their behavior. And now something inside you is saying, I cannot keep doing this. You are tired of analyzing. You are tired of guessing. You are tired of wondering whether you are important to someone who does not seem capable of making that clear. And when Virgo reaches that point, it can be very difficult to reverse the decision. Because once you have emotionally detached, you do not always return to the same place. You may still care. You may still remember. You may still wonder, but the access is different. Something has changed, and this person may be sensing that change. They may feel that you are slowly becoming unreachable. They may notice that you no longer react the way you used to. They may notice that you no longer ask questions. You no longer initiate conversations. You no longer demand explanations. You no longer seem affected by their absence. And they may be interpreting your calmness as a sign that they have lost you. The truth is, you may not be as unaffected as you appear. You may simply be tired of allowing your emotions to control your decisions. You may have reached a point where you are saying, if they wanted to be here, they would be here. And that sentence may feel completely logical, but sometimes people want to be somewhere and still do not know how to get there. Sometimes people have feelings and still behave badly. Sometimes people care and still allow fear to make decisions for them. And that does not make the behavior acceptable. But it does mean that the story may be more complicated than you think. This person may be dealing with something they have not told you. They may be emotionally overwhelmed. They may be afraid of being rejected. They may be carrying guilt about the way they handled things. They may feel that you deserve more than they are currently capable of giving. And instead of communicating that honestly, they withdraw. They disappear. They become inconsistent. They create distance. And from your perspective, it looks like they do not care. But from their perspective, they may believe that they are protecting you from their own inability to be emotionally present. That does not mean you should wait forever. It does not mean you should accept confusion indefinitely. But it does mean that there may be a conversation you need to have before you make a final decision. Because Virgo, your biggest mistake may be assuming that you already know the entire story. You may have enough information to be suspicious. You may have enough information to be disappointed. You may have enough information to be tired. But do you have enough information to know exactly what this person feels? That is the question. You may think you know. You may have studied their behavior. You may have analyzed every interaction. You may have compared their words to their actions, and perhaps you have noticed a contradiction. They act like they do not care, but they still find reasons to remain connected. They act like they are moving on, but they still react to your presence. They act like you are not important, but they remember details about you. They act distant, but when you truly disappear, they notice. And this contradiction may be driving you crazy because you want simple answers. You want people to say what they mean. You want behavior to match words. You want someone who wants you to simply say, I want you. And when someone cannot do that, you may decide that the answer is no. But what if the answer is not no? What if the answer is fear? What if the answer is insecurity? What if the answer is emotional immaturity? What if the answer is that this person has never learned how to handle something that actually matters to them? Again, Virgo, this is not an excuse for poor behavior. You are not being asked to become someone's therapist. You are not being asked to rescue someone from their emotional problems. You are not being asked to accept being treated badly simply because a person secretly has feelings. But before you permanently remove someone from your life, ask yourself one thing. Have you actually had the honest conversation? Not the conversation where you both pretend everything is fine. Not the conversation where you hint. Not the conversation where you hope they will read between the lines. The real conversation, the one where you say, this is how your behavior has made me feel. The one where you ask, what do you actually want? The one where you stop protecting yourself long enough to give the other person a chance to be honest. Because perhaps you have both been waiting. You have been waiting for them to make the first move. They have been waiting for you to show that you still care. You are waiting for proof. They are waiting for reassurance. You are interpreting their silence as disinterest. They are interpreting your silence as rejection. And the connection is slowly dying under the weight of assumptions. That is the danger. Not always the absence of feelings. Sometimes the danger is the absence of communication. And Virgo, you may be very close to deciding that this person has no place in your future. You may be preparing to move on. You may be preparing to give someone else the opportunity they failed to appreciate. You may be telling yourself that you have wasted enough time, and maybe you have, but perhaps this is the final moment before a truth comes to the surface. This person may realize that they are about to lose you, and the possibility of losing you may finally force them to confront what they have been avoiding. Because some people do not understand the seriousness of a situation until they realize that your patience is not unlimited. They may have assumed you would always be there. They may have assumed that even if they disappeared, you would eventually return. They may have believed that the connection was safe, but now they are beginning to understand that you can actually leave. Not as a threat, not to manipulate them, but because you have reached the end of what you are willing to tolerate. And that realization may create a reaction. They may suddenly want to talk. They may send a message. They may try to reopen communication. They may ask how you are doing. They may bring up something from the past. They may make a small attempt to reconnect. And Virgo, you may be tempted to reject them immediately. You may see the message and think, now you want to talk. You may feel anger. You may feel disappointment. You may feel like they have had enough opportunities, and those feelings are valid. But before you respond from the deepest place of hurt, ask yourself whether you want closure or whether you want clarity, because those are not always the same thing. Closure says, I have decided what this means. Clarity says, I want to know the truth before I decide. And perhaps the mistake would be choosing closure before giving yourself the chance to receive clarity. This person may not have a perfect explanation. They may not suddenly become the ideal communicator. They may not say everything exactly the way you want to hear it, but perhaps they will finally say something real, something that explains the distance, something that reveals the fear, something that shows you that the connection was not imaginary. And then, Virgo, you will have information, real information, not guesses, not assumptions, not interpretations, information. And with that information, you can make a decision that is actually yours. You can decide whether this person deserves another opportunity. You can decide whether the damage is too significant. You can decide whether the feelings are enough to justify rebuilding trust. You can decide whether you are willing to see whether their actions change. But you cannot make that decision properly if you are only responding to a story you created to fill the silence. And perhaps this person has also been creating a story. They may believe you have already moved on. They may believe that you hate them. They may believe that you have found someone else. They may believe that you no longer care. And because they believe that, they do not approach you. You may think, if they wanted me, they would come forward. They may be thinking, if Virgo wanted me, they would let me know. And now, two people who may still care about each other are standing on opposite sides of the same wall, both waiting, both watching, both afraid, both pretending to be more detached than they really are. And eventually, someone has to decide whether the wall is more important than the connection. Virgo, this is where you need to be honest with yourself. Do you actually want this person gone? Or do you want the confusion to stop? Those are two very different things. Do you truly feel nothing? Or are you trying to convince yourself that you feel nothing because caring has become painful? Do you genuinely want a new beginning with someone else? Or are you trying to move on because you believe this person will never give you what you need? Do you feel peace when you imagine never speaking to them again? Or do you feel a strange heaviness because your body often knows what your mind is trying to deny? You may say, I am over it, but when their name appears, your heart reacts. You may say, I do not care, but you still wonder what they are doing. You may say, I would never take them back, but you still imagine what it would be like if they finally explained themselves. And Virgo, that does not mean you are weak. It means you are human. The goal is not to pretend that you do not care. The goal is to decide what you are willing to accept. You can still love someone and choose not to be with them. You can still miss someone and know that they are not healthy for you. You can still understand why someone behaved badly and decide that you do not want to experience it again. But before you make a decision based on anger, make sure the anger is truly what you want to carry forward. Because sometimes we think we are choosing peace when we are actually choosing avoidance. We think we are protecting ourselves when we are actually preventing ourselves from hearing the truth. And perhaps this is what is happening now. You may be about to make a huge mistake because you are trying to protect yourself from being disappointed again. You may be choosing to end everything before the other person has the opportunity to hurt you. You may be thinking, I will leave first so they cannot leave me. And that is a very understandable instinct. But Virgo, there is a difference between protecting yourself and punishing someone for what someone else did. Perhaps this person has not earned your trust yet. Fine. They do not need to receive your complete trust immediately. Perhaps they have made mistakes. Fine. They need to take responsibility. Perhaps you are still hurt. Fine. You do not have to pretend that you are not. But perhaps you can allow one honest conversation without surrendering your boundaries. You can listen without promising anything. You can hear them without accepting every explanation. You can allow them to speak without giving them immediate access to your heart again. And that may be the middle ground you have been missing. You do not have to choose between completely shutting the door and completely letting someone back in. There is another option. You can open the door just enough to see who is standing there. You can ask questions. You can observe. You can listen. And then you can decide. That is power. You do not have to rush. You do not have to answer immediately. You do not have to become emotional simply because someone finally decided to communicate. Let them show you who they are. Let them explain. Let them take responsibility. And then watch what happens next. Because words can create a moment, actions create a pattern. If this person truly wants to repair something with you, their behavior will eventually become more consistent. They will not simply appear when they are lonely. They will not disappear when things become difficult. They will not expect you to forget everything overnight. They will understand that trust is rebuilt slowly. And if they are not willing to do that, then you will have your answer. But at least you will have made your decision based on reality, not fear, not pride, not assumptions, not the silence between two people who are too afraid to speak. There is also something you may need to understand about this person. They may not be as confident as they appear. They may seem emotionally detached. They may appear to have moved on easily. They may act as though nothing affected them. But this could be a performance. Some people are incredibly skilled at appearing unbothered. They can laugh, they can socialize, they can continue their daily lives, they can post as though everything is perfect. And meanwhile, privately, they are thinking about the one person they cannot seem to forget. You may be one of those people for this individual. They may not want you to know how much you affected them. They may fear that admitting it gives you power. They may fear that you will reject them. They may fear that you will see how vulnerable they really are. And so they remain silent. They pretend. They wait. But the feelings do not disappear simply because they are not spoken. And the longer the silence continues, the more difficult the eventual conversation becomes. That may be why this person is approaching a breaking point. They may realize that they cannot continue pretending. They may realize that if they do not say something soon, you will genuinely move on. And once you do, they may not know how to get you back. Because Virgo, when you are truly done, you are not always dramatic. You do not necessarily announce your departure. You may simply stop participating. You stop asking. You stop hoping. You stop waiting. And one day the person realizes that the version of you who used to care so openly is no longer available. That can be a devastating realization for someone who assumed they had more time. They may have thought they could return whenever they wanted. They may have thought you would always be emotionally connected to them. But now you are changing. You are becoming more focused on yourself. You are beginning to understand that your life cannot remain paused while someone decides what they want. You are no longer willing to live in emotional limbo. And this growth is healthy. But the warning is simply saying, do not confuse moving forward with refusing to look back one final time for the truth. You can move forward and still have one conversation. You can have boundaries and still be honest. You can be strong and still admit that someone mattered to you. You can protect yourself without pretending that the connection meant nothing. And perhaps that is the lesson. You do not have to become cold in order to be wise. You do not have to destroy your feelings in order to protect your future. You do not have to pretend that you never cared. You simply need to become more selective about what you allow back into your life. If this person returns, they should not return to the same version of you. They should meet the version of you who has learned, the version who asks questions, the version who observes behavior, the version who does not accept vague promises, the version who understands that love without consistency becomes confusion. And if they want another chance, they will need to understand that. They will need to prove that they are not simply reacting to the fear of losing access to you. They will need to show that they actually want to build something different, because sometimes people come back because they miss you, and sometimes people come back because they miss the way you made them feel. Those are not always the same thing. Someone can miss your attention without being ready to love you properly. Someone can miss your presence without being prepared to give you stability. Someone can regret losing you without having changed. And that is why you must observe. Do not be impressed by a sudden emotional message alone. Do not allow one conversation to erase months of confusion. Do not confuse someone's regret with transformation. Let their actions speak. But also, do not reject a genuine attempt simply because it arrived later than you wanted. People are imperfect. Sometimes they realize the truth after making mistakes. Sometimes they need to lose something before they understand its value. That does not automatically mean you should take them back, but it may mean that they deserve the opportunity to tell you what they have learned. And you deserve the opportunity to decide, with all the information available, there is something else here, Virgo. You may be comparing this person to the version of them that hurt you, and that makes sense. When someone disappoints you, your mind often freezes them in that moment. You remember the person who ignored you, the person who disappointed you, the person who did not show up, the person who made you feel unimportant. And every time you think about them, you see that version. But people can change. Not everyone does, but some people do. The question is not whether they say they have changed. The question is whether their current behavior shows it. And you may need to give yourself permission to discover the answer, not to guarantee them another chance, not to promise a relationship, simply to discover the truth. Because the biggest mistake may not be giving someone another chance. The biggest mistake may be refusing to discover whether they have actually become someone different. And Virgo, you are not the same person you were when this connection began. You have changed too. You have learned, you have become more aware of what you need. You have become more aware of what you will no longer tolerate. You have learned how to be alone. You have learned how to recover. You have learned that losing someone does not mean losing yourself. And because you have grown, you can approach this situation differently. You do not have to return to the past. You can meet the present. You can ask, who are we now? Not, who were we? Not, what did we promise each other? Not, what did I hope this would become? Who are you now? Who are they now? What is actually possible now? That is the question. And perhaps the answer will surprise you. Maybe you will discover that they truly have not changed. Maybe you will discover that the connection is no longer what you imagined. Maybe you will finally receive the closure you needed. Or maybe unexpectedly you will discover that this person has been carrying feelings they never knew how to express. And maybe, just maybe, there is still something worth exploring. But you will never know if you decide before the truth has a chance to speak. Virgo, you have spent enough time trying to decode silence. It is time for honesty. If this person wants to communicate, let them communicate. If they want to explain themselves, let them explain. If they want another opportunity, let them ask for it. But do not do the emotional work for them. Do not create their explanation. Do not excuse their behavior before they take responsibility. Do not tell yourself a beautiful story just because you want the ending to be different. Let reality reveal itself. And if the reality is disappointing, you will survive it. You have survived disappointment before. You have survived people leaving. You have survived betrayal. You have survived being misunderstood. You have survived the moments when you thought you would never feel okay again. You will survive the truth, but you may regret never asking for it. That is the warning. Not that you should abandon your standards, not that you should wait indefinitely, not that you should accept less than you deserve. The warning is simply this: do not make a permanent decision from a temporary emotional state. Do not burn a bridge while you are still standing in the middle of it, wondering whether you actually wanted to cross. Do not let pride speak for your heart if your heart still has questions. Do not let fear make a decision that you will later wish you had made with more information. And if you truly want to leave, leave. But leave because you know, not because you assume there is a difference. And someone may be hoping you understand that difference before it is too late. They may be closer to speaking than you realize. They may be watching your behavior. They may be trying to determine whether you would even listen. They may be afraid that you have already decided. They may be afraid that no explanation could change your mind. And perhaps they are right. Perhaps you are already done. But perhaps deep down you know that there is still something unresolved. Something you never said. Something they never said. Something that has remained between you. And that unresolved energy may be the reason this person continues to appear in your thoughts. You may have moved on. in every practical way, but emotionally, there may still be a question. What if? And Virgo, sometimes the only way to silence a what if is to finally discover the answer. Not by fantasizing, not by assuming, not by waiting, by having the conversation. The person who is involved may also be realizing that they have been careless with your heart. They may understand that you gave them more patience than they deserved. They may understand that they made you question yourself. They may understand that their inconsistency created wounds they never intended to create. And now they may want to correct something, not necessarily because they expect everything to return to the way it was, but because they do not want the final memory between you to be silence and misunderstanding. They may want you to know the truth. They may want you to know that you mattered. They may want you to know that the distance was not proof that you were unimportant. And perhaps that is all they are asking for. The opportunity to tell you the decision afterward remains yours. You do not owe anyone reconciliation. You do not owe anyone access. You do not owe anyone another chance. But if you still care, you may owe yourself the truth. And Virgo, that is the most important message here. Do not make a decision solely because you are afraid of what you might feel. You are capable of feeling something and still choosing wisely. You are capable of loving someone and still maintaining boundaries. You are capable of listening without surrendering your power. You are capable of forgiving without forgetting. You are capable of understanding someone without allowing them to hurt you again. You are much stronger than the version of you who first entered this situation. And that means you can face the truth now. Whatever it is, if they have changed, you will see it. If they have not, you will see that too. If they truly care, their actions will eventually reveal it. If they only miss the comfort you provided, that will become obvious. You do not need to force the answer. You simply need to stop making assumptions in the absence of communication. And if this person reaches out, do not immediately respond from the wound. Take your time, read the message, feel what you feel. Ask yourself what you actually want, not what your pride wants, not what your anger wants, not what your fear wants. What do you want? Do you want clarity? Do you want closure? Do you want another chance? Do you want nothing at all? Your answer matters, and you are allowed to change your mind as you receive new information. You are not weak because you once wanted someone and now want answers. You are not foolish because you still care. You are not betraying yourself because you are willing to listen. And you are not obligated to return simply because someone finally tells you the truth. You are allowed to listen and still walk away. You are allowed to listen and stay. You are allowed to listen and say, I understand, but I cannot do this anymore. You are allowed to say, I need time. You are allowed to say, show me. And perhaps show me is the most powerful response of all, because words are easy, promises are easy, regret is easy, consistency is difficult. Let this person show you who they are now, not who they claim to be, not who you hope they will become, who they are. And Virgo, you will know. You are extremely observant. You notice the smallest details. You notice when someone's energy is genuine. You notice when someone is performing. You notice when someone is telling the truth. You may doubt yourself because your emotions become involved, but your instincts are often sharper than you realize. So listen to your intuition. But do not confuse intuition with fear. Intuition is usually quiet. Fear is loud. Intuition says, pay attention. Fear says, run before anything can happen. Intuition notices. Fear assumes. And perhaps the mistake you are about to make is allowing fear to disguise itself as intuition. You may tell yourself that you are simply protecting your peace, but deep down, you may be afraid of being disappointed again. And if that is true, be honest with yourself. You do not have to be ashamed of that fear. You simply do not have to allow it to make every decision, because sometimes the person who hurt you is not the person who will hurt you next. Sometimes the situation has changed. Sometimes you have changed. Sometimes the story is not finished. And sometimes, yes, the story is finished, but you deserve to know which one it is. Virgo, before you close the door completely, look at the situation one more time. Not through the lens of your anger, not through the lens of your hope. Look at it honestly. What did this person actually do? What did they actually say? What have they actually shown you? And what are you assuming? Separate the facts from the fears. Separate the truth from the story. Separate what you know from what you have imagined. That is where your answer may be found. Because perhaps this person did not stop caring. Perhaps they simply stopped communicating. Perhaps you did not stop caring. Perhaps you simply stopped showing it. And now the connection is trapped between two people who are both waiting for the other to move first. Someone may have to break the pattern. And perhaps the person who is most afraid of losing the connection will eventually do it. They may send the message. They may make the call. They may finally say what they should have said long ago. And when that happens, Virgo, remember who you are now. You are not the same person who waited helplessly. You are not the same person who accepted confusion without questioning it. You are not the same person who believed that love required you to abandon yourself. You have grown. You have standards. You have boundaries. You have options. You have a life beyond this person. And that is exactly why you can listen without losing yourself. If this person truly wants to be part of your life, they will need to meet the version of you that exists now. Not the version who tolerated everything, the version who knows better, the version who understands that love is not enough without effort, the version who knows that feelings without communication create chaos. The version who understands that someone can care about you and still be wrong for you. And the version who also understands that someone can make mistakes and still have the capacity to grow. The decision is yours, but make it with open eyes. That is all. Before you say never again, make sure you truly mean it. Before you reject the conversation, make sure you do not secretly want the truth. Before you move on completely, make sure you are not simply trying to convince yourself that you no longer care. And before you let someone back in, make sure they have earned the opportunity. This is not about choosing them over yourself. It is about choosing the truth over assumptions. Because Virgo, your heart may be closer to an important realization than you think. Someone may still care. Someone may still be afraid. Someone may still be hoping. Someone may still be thinking about what they lost. And someone may be preparing to approach you after realizing that their silence has brought them dangerously close to losing you permanently. They may finally understand that you are not going to wait forever. They may finally understand that your patience has a limit. They may finally understand that you can love someone and still walk away. And that realization may change their behavior. But again, let them show you. Do not chase. Do not beg. Do not convince. Do not rescue. Simply remain open enough to receive the truth if it arrives, and strong enough to reject what no longer serves you. Virgo, you may be standing at a crossroads. One path is familiar. You know how it feels to walk away. You have done it before. You know how to shut down. You know how to detach. You know how to become busy. You know how to tell yourself that you are fine. And perhaps that path is exactly what you need. But there is another path. The path of one final, honest conversation. The path of asking instead of assuming. The path of listening instead of predicting. The path of allowing someone to reveal whether they are still the same person who hurt you or whether they have finally learned from it. And perhaps that path is worth considering, not because this person is guaranteed to be your future, not because every connection must be saved, but because you deserve to make a decision based on the truth. You have already survived the worst case scenario in your mind. You have already imagined them leaving. You have already imagined them choosing someone else. You have already imagined never speaking again. You have already felt the pain of losing them, even if the loss has not technically happened. So perhaps you are not as afraid as you think. Perhaps you are simply tired, and there is a difference between being done and being exhausted. Being done means your heart has found peace. Being exhausted means your heart needs rest. And perhaps you have been making decisions from exhaustion. You may need to rest before you decide. You may need to step away from the emotional intensity. You may need to stop analyzing every message. You may need to stop looking for signs. You may need to give yourself enough space to hear your own thoughts. And then when the emotion settles, you will know more clearly what you want. Because sometimes the biggest mistake is not choosing the wrong person. Sometimes the biggest mistake is making an irreversible decision while you are emotionally overwhelmed. Virgo, take your time. The truth is not going anywhere. If this person truly wants to communicate, they will find a way. If they truly want to repair something, they will make an effort. If they truly value you, they will eventually show it. And if they do not, then you will know. But do not close the door simply because you are afraid of what might be on the other side. You have the power to open it without inviting everything back inside. You can look, you can listen, you can decide. And that is the difference between being vulnerable and being powerless. You are not powerless. You are not helpless. You are not trapped. You are simply being asked to pause before making a decision that could permanently change a connection that may still have unfinished business. Someone may be closer to speaking than you realize. Someone may be realizing that they made a mistake. Someone may be understanding that they treated your patience like it had no limits. Someone may be preparing to admit that they cared more than they showed. And perhaps, Virgo, you are about to find out that the person you thought had forgotten you has been thinking about you all along. Not perfectly, not consistently, not always in the way you deserved, but more than you knew. And maybe the real mistake would be assuming that because they failed to express their feelings properly, they did not have any. You can hold them accountable for their actions and still acknowledge that their feelings may have been real. Both things can be true. They may have cared and still hurt you. They may have loved you and still failed you. They may regret losing you and still not be capable of giving you what you need. The truth is often more complicated than the simple answers we want. But complicated does not mean impossible. It means you need to pay attention. And Virgo, you are good at paying attention. So before you make that final decision, slow down, breathe, ask yourself what you know, ask yourself what you assume, ask yourself what you want. And if the answer is that you still want to hear from this person, do not be ashamed of that. If the answer is that you still care, do not punish yourself for it. If the answer is that you need one final conversation, allow yourself to have it. And if the answer is that you are truly finished, then walk away with peace. But do not walk away simply to prove that you can. You have already proven that you can survive without anyone. You have already proven that you can leave. You have already proven that you can rebuild yourself. The question now is not whether you can walk away. The question is whether walking away is genuinely what you want. Because, Virgo, there may be someone who is afraid that you are about to make a decision they will never be able to undo. They may be afraid that by the time they finally find the courage to speak, you will no longer care what they have to say. They may be afraid that you have already closed your heart. They may be afraid that the person they once had access to is gone. And perhaps that fear is finally forcing them to act. You may receive an unexpected message. You may hear from someone you thought was finished with you. You may find yourself having a conversation you never expected to have again. And when that moment comes, do not let surprise make the decision for you. Listen, observe, feel, and then decide. You do not have to immediately forgive. You do not have to immediately trust. You do not have to immediately return. But you also do not have to immediately reject. You can take your time. You can say, I need to think about this. You can say, I hear you. You can say, I understand what you are saying, but I need to see change. And if they are serious, they will understand. Because someone who truly wants to rebuild something will not demand that you forget the damage simply because they have finally become ready. They will respect the time it takes. They will understand that your heart cannot be switched on and off according to their schedule. They will know that if they want access to you again, they must earn it. And if they cannot accept that, then perhaps they are not ready. Either way, you win clarity, and clarity is what you need. Virgo, you have been through too much to continue living in confusion. You deserve honesty. You deserve consistency. You deserve someone who does not make you question your value. You deserve communication. You deserve effort. You deserve a connection where you do not constantly have to guess. But before you decide that this person can never give you those things, make sure you have given reality the opportunity to answer. Maybe they can, maybe they cannot, but you deserve to know. That is the warning. Do not let one painful chapter convince you that the entire story has already been written. Do not let fear turn a question into a conclusion. Do not let pride prevent you from hearing something your heart has been waiting to hear. And do not let anyone back into your life simply because you miss them. Miss them if you miss them. Love them if you love them. But require proof. Require consistency. Require accountability. Require something different. Because you are different now. And if this person wants another opportunity, they need to understand that. You are no longer willing to accept the same behavior and hope for a different result. You are no longer willing to live on potential. You are no longer willing to be loved only when it is convenient. You are no longer willing to decode silence. You are no longer willing to beg for clarity. And perhaps that is what this person needs to understand. If they come back, they cannot come back with the same energy. They cannot offer you the same confusion. They cannot expect you to be the same version of yourself. They must meet you where you are now, and where you are now is stronger, wiser, more discerning, more aware, more protective of your peace, but still capable of love, still capable of forgiveness, still capable of seeing the best in someone without ignoring the truth. That is the balance you are learning, and perhaps this situation is part of that lesson. You do not have to choose between being completely guarded and completely open. You can be selective, you can be careful, you can listen, you can observe, you can love with boundaries, and that is what you should do now. Before it is too late to hear the truth, before you permanently close a door that you may still want to look behind, before someone finally finds the courage to speak and discovers that you have already decided that their words no longer matter. Virgo, maybe they do not matter. Maybe they should have spoken sooner. Maybe their opportunity has passed. But make that decision consciously, not emotionally, not impulsively, not because you are tired of waiting for someone to become the person you need. Ask yourself one final time, if this person came to you today and told you the complete truth, would you want to hear it? If the answer is yes, then perhaps the story is not finished. If the answer is no, then perhaps you already know everything you need to know. And both answers are okay. You are allowed to move on. You are allowed to stay. You are allowed to forgive. You are allowed to forget. You are allowed to listen. You are allowed to say no. The power is yours. But do not give that power to fear. Do not allow fear to decide that someone has no feelings simply because they were too afraid to express them. Do not allow pride to decide that you never cared simply because caring made you vulnerable. Do not allow anger to decide your entire future. Pause, listen, then choose, because someone may be closer to the truth than you realize. Someone may be about to reveal what has been hidden. Someone may be about to admit that they never truly stopped caring. And Virgo, the decision that comes after that truth will be yours, not theirs. Yours, and whatever you choose, choose it with clarity. Choose it because you know. Choose it because you have observed. Choose it because your peace truly requires it. Not because you are trying to punish someone. Not because you are trying to prove that you can survive without them. You already know that you can. The question is whether they have earned the opportunity to remain in your life. And perhaps before you make the final decision, you need to see the answer. If this message resonated with you, take a moment to support the channel by liking, subscribing, and sharing your thoughts below. Sometimes a simple interaction helps this message reach someone who needs to hear it before making an important emotional decision. And if a specific person immediately came to your mind, do not rush to create a story around that feeling. Simply notice it. Sometimes the person we are trying hardest to forget is connected to a conversation we never truly finished. For now, Virgo, do not panic. Do not rush. Do not make a permanent decision from a temporary wave of emotion. You are allowed to pause. You are allowed to ask questions. You are allowed to protect yourself. You are allowed to listen. And most importantly, you are allowed to choose the truth. Because perhaps you are about to make a huge mistake. Perhaps you are about to walk away from someone who still cares. Perhaps you are about to close a door before they finally explain what was really happening. Or perhaps after hearing the truth, you will realize that leaving was exactly what you needed to do. But do not decide before you know. That is the warning. Listen before it is too late.